My father will have your job by lunch. Those were the first words Madison Hartwell said when she walked into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom at 11:03 on a Tuesday morning. She wasn't whispering. She wasn't apologizing. She was threatening. An $85 parking ticket. Handicapped space, number 4, right outside the Roger Williams Cancer Treatment Center in Providence, Rhode Island. Madison Hartwell, 23 years old, daughter of State Senator Richard Hartwell, standing there in designer sunglasses and a Chanel blazer, acting like the law was a suggestion meant for other people. But here's what she didn't know. Here's what made her smirk fade over the next hour. A disabled veteran couldn't park for his chemotherapy appointment that morning because Madison's BMW was in his spot. His name was Robert Chen, 68 years old, Marine Corps veteran, stage 3 cancer. And he would tell Judge Caprio a story that would make the entire courtroom go silent. But Judge Caprio was about to discover something even bigger. This wasn't Madison's first time using her father's name as a shield. It wasn't her second or third either. 17 dismissed tickets across 3 years, every courthouse in Rhode Island, fire lanes, handicap zones, no parking areas near hospitals and schools. And every single time, one phone call made them disappear. Every single time. Someone in power decided Madison Hartwell didn't have to follow the rules the rest of us do. And that $85 parking ticket would expose a network of political favors that had been quietly protecting the powerful while punishing everyone else. A system where your last name mattered more than the law. Where a Marine veteran threw up on the sidewalk because a senator's daughter wanted convenient parking for her morning coffee. So here's what you need to ask yourself. Will political pressure force Judge Caprio to back down like every other judge before him? Or will he do what no other judge has dared to do and hold a politician's daughter accountable on the record where everyone can see it? What happens when entitled privilege meets a judge who refuses to look away? If you've ever been in a courtroom watching someone with connections walk away while you couldn't, if you've ever paid a ticket you couldn't afford while others never paid at all, if you've ever wondered whether justice actually means everyone or just means everyone except them, then subscribe to Judgment Story. Because sometimes justice requires a judge brave enough to stand alone against power. This one gets uncomfortable. Power doesn't surrender quietly. Tuesday morning, 11:03 a.m., Providence Municipal Court. The courtroom was half full. Routine traffic docket. People checking their phones, waiting for their names to be called. Judge Caprio sat at the bench reviewing the morning's cases. Then the bailiff called it, case number 2024-C V-8847. Citation for parking in handicap zone without permit. State versus Madison Hartwell. She walked to the defendant's table like she was walking into a restaurant she owned. Designer everything. Sunglasses still on indoors. Checking her phone. Not worried. Her attorney stood next to her. Expensive suit. Leather briefcase already open, preparing paperwork for what he clearly expected would be a quick dismissal. Behind them in the gallery, Officer Torres sat in uniform, the one who'd issued the citation. And in the back row, a man in a wheelchair, Robert Chen. Watching, waiting. Judge Caprio looked up from the file. Ms. Hartwell, you're here regarding a citation for parking in a handicapped space. How do you plead? Madison didn't even look up from her phone. Not guilty, obviously. This is ridiculous. The sign wasn't visible from my angle. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. Ms. Hartwell, I'm going to need you to put your phone away and remove your sunglasses. We're in court. She sighed, made a show of it. Dropped her phone in her purse, took off the sunglasses slowly, like she was doing him a favor. The citation was clear. Parked in designated handicapped space number 4. No visible permit displayed. 9:47 a.m. Right outside the Roger Williams Cancer Treatment Center. Officer Torres had photographed everything. The blue lines painted on the ground. The sign mounted at eye level. Madison's black BMW sitting there. No permit hanging from the rearview mirror. No placard on the dashboard. Madison's attorney stepped forward. Your Honor, my client was briefly parked in that space while running a quick errand. The signage was partially obscured by tree branches. She was only there for approximately 20 minutes. This was an honest mistake, and we'd like to request dismissal given her clean record. Judge Caprio looked at the attorney, then at Madison. Then, back at the file. Miss Hartwell, when you parked that morning, did you see the blue lines painted on the ground? Madison hesitated. Just for a second. I wasn't really paying attention to the ground. I was in a hurry. That's not what I asked. Did you see the blue lines? Yes or no? I don't remember. Judge Caprio made a note. Then he flipped through the file, stopped on a page, read something, flipped to another page. His expression changed. There's a notation here from the clerk's office. Miss Hartwell, have you received parking citations before? Her attorney jumped in. Your Honor, my client's prior record isn't relevant to this specific citation. I'll decide what's relevant. Miss Hartwell, answer the question. Madison shifted her weight. I mean, maybe once or twice. Everyone gets tickets. Judge Caprio looked at the bailiff. Please pull all citation records for Madison Hartwell for the last 5 years. All jurisdictions in Rhode Island. The courtroom got quieter. People stopped looking at their phones. Officer Torres sat up straighter, and in the back, Robert Chen in his wheelchair leaned forward slightly. You could feel something shifting. The bailiff left, came back 8 minutes later with a folder, handed it to Judge Caprio. The judge opened it, started reading. His jaw tightened. He read in silence for a full minute. Then he looked up. Miss Hartwell, according to these records, you have 17 prior parking citations across Providence, Cranston, and Warwick. Fire lanes, handicapped zones, no parking zones near hospitals and schools. Madison's attorney tried to interrupt. Your Honor, those citations they were all dismissed, every single one. Let me read you the timeline. 2021, 3 citations, all dismissed within 48 hours. 2022, 5 citations, all dismissed within 24 hours. 2023, 6 citations, all dismissed the same day they were issued. 2024, 3 citations, including today. The first 2 were already dismissed. Judge Caprio set the folder down. While you accumulated 17 violations without a single consequence, the average person in Rhode Island pays $150 per ticket or faces license suspension. So I'm going to ask you again, and I want the truth. Is this the first time you've parked in a handicapped space? Madison didn't answer right away. Her attorney whispered something to her. She shook her head at him. Then she looked at Judge Caprio. Look, I've gotten tickets. They got dismissed. That's not illegal. How did they get dismissed? I don't know. My father's office handles that stuff. Your father's office? State Senator Richard Hartwell's office? Yes. Judge Caprio turned to the bailiff again. Call Officer Torres to the stand. Officer Torres walked to the witness stand, raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth. He'd been a parking enforcement officer for 6 years, 1,847 citations issued. 0 complaints on his record. He was nervous, but he was clear. Judge Caprio asked him to walk through what he witnessed that morning. Officer Torres pulled out his notes. I was patrolling the Cancer Center lot at 9:45 a.m. I observed a black BMW parked in handicapped space number 4, no permit visible. I approached the vehicle, confirmed no placard on the dashboard, no hang tag on the mirror. I began writing the citation. At 9:51, the defendant exited the Starbucks across the street and approached her vehicle. She saw me writing the ticket. What did she say? Officer Torres looked uncomfortable. He glanced at Madison, then back at Judge Caprio. She said, Do you know who my father is? You're wasting your time. Then she got in her car and drove away. The courtroom reacted. Whispers. Someone in the gallery said something under their breath. Judge Caprio raised his hand for silence. Madison's face flushed. I was frustrated. I say things I don't mean when I'm stressed. Judge Caprio didn't break eye contact. You weren't stressed about the ticket. You were annoyed that Officer Torres didn't recognize your name. Before Madison could respond, Judge Caprio picked up his phone. He dialed a number, put it on speaker. It rang 3 times. A woman answered. Roger Williams, Cancer Treatment Center, Administration. This is Diane. This is Judge Frank Caprio from Providence Municipal Court. I have a case before me involving a parking citation issued in your lot on the morning of October 15th. I need to verify something. Do you have records of any patients who experienced parking difficulties that morning? There was a pause. Then Diane's voice came back. Yes, Your Honor. One of our patients, Mr. Robert Chen, called our front desk that morning at 10:05. He'd been circling the lot for 18 minutes looking for handicapped parking. He was scheduled for chemotherapy at 9:45. He was late. We had to reschedule his appointment. Judge Caprio closed his eyes for a moment. How late was he? He arrived at 10:12. We couldn't fit him in. His chemotherapy was rescheduled for 6 days later. 6 days? Yes, Your Honor. We've reported the parking abuse in our lot to the city for 2 years. Nothing changes. Thank you, Diane. Judge Caprio ended the call. The courtroom was dead silent. Then a voice came from the back. An older man. She's parked in the fire lane outside my son's school 3 times last year. I reported it every time. Nothing happened. Judge Caprio looked at the man. What's your name, sir? David Pacheco. My son goes to Hope High School. She parks in the fire lane during pickup. Blocks the whole zone. I called the principal. I called parking enforcement. They said they'd handle it. Nothing changed. Judge Caprio made another note. Then he looked at the bailiff. The bailiff was holding another folder. Your Honor, I cross-referenced with the city clerk's office. All 17 dismissals have corresponding phone logs. Senator Hartwell's office called each courthouse within hours of every ticket being issued. Judge Caprio opened the new folder. Started reading aloud. 17 citations. Total value, $1,445. All dismissed. Phone logs confirm calls from Senator Hartwell's office to Providence Municipal Court, Cranston Traffic Court, and Warwick District Court. Average time between citation and dismissal, 14.3 hours. That's 1 phone call, 1 dismissal, every 2.1 months for 3 years. He looked up, directly at Madison. Do you understand what that means? While regular people are losing their licenses because they can't afford tickets, you've been parking wherever you want and making it disappear with a phone call. Madison opened her mouth, closed it. Her attorney tried to speak, but Judge Caprio raised his hand. I'm not done. There's a written statement here from the victim, Mr. Robert Chen. I'm going to read it. The courtroom went silent again. Judge Caprio began reading. My name is Robert Chen. I'm 68 years old. I served in the Marine Corps for 12 years. I have stage 3 colon cancer. On the morning of October 15th, I arrived at the cancer center for my chemotherapy appointment at 9:38. I drove around the parking lot for 18 minutes, looking for handicapped parking. Every space was full except one. That space had a BMW in it with no handicapped permit. I circled 6 times. My appointment was at 9:45. I called the front desk at 10:05 to tell them I couldn't find parking. They told me I'd have to reschedule. I parked 3 blocks away and walked. I threw up twice on the way. But I followed the rules, because that's what you do. My treatment was delayed by 6 days. My oncologist told me timing matters with chemotherapy. 6 days matters. Judge Caprio set the statement down. His voice was quieter now, controlled. Mr. Chen is here today. He's in the back of the courtroom in his wheelchair. Everyone turned. Robert Chen sat there, gray hair, thin, wearing a Marine's cap. He didn't say anything. He just looked at Madison. Judge Caprio looked at her too. Did you see the handicap symbol painted on the ground? Yes or no? Yes. Did you mention your father's name to Officer Torres? Yes or no? Yes. Have you or your father's office called courthouses to dismiss previous tickets? Yes or no? Madison hesitated. Her attorney leaned in to whisper. She pulled away. Yes. Why? Because everyone uses connections. That's how the world works. Judge Caprio's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped. You saw a handicapped space outside a cancer center and decided your coffee was more important than someone's chemotherapy. Then you used your father's office to erase accountability. 17 times. No one spoke. 8 seconds passed. Then 12. Then 15. Madison's attorney stopped writing. Officer Torres stared at his hands. Robert Chen, in his wheelchair, didn't move. Madison finally put her phone down completely. Judge Caprio's hands were folded on the bench. His eyes stayed on Madison. Then he spoke. Privilege gets loud when it's challenged. Accountability gets quiet, so truth can be heard. Another 10 seconds of silence. Then Judge Caprio picked up his gavel. Here's my finding. Miss Hartwell, you are guilty of parking in a designated handicapped space without authorization. Officer Torres's testimony is credible. The photographs show clear signage and pavement markings. Your pattern of behavior over 3 years shows this was not a mistake. And Mr. Chen missed his chemotherapy window because you wanted convenient parking for coffee. Madison's attorney stood. Your Honor, we'd like to request. Sit down. I'm not finished. Judge Caprio looked at the file again. I'm upholding this citation. $85 fine, maximum penalty under the statute. Additionally, I'm referring all 17 prior dismissals to the State Ethics Commission for a formal review of political interference in judicial proceedings. Madison stood up. You can't do this. My father. She reached for her phone. Miss Hartwell, if you pull out that phone to call your father, I will hold you in contempt. She froze. Then she stepped back from the table, walked toward the courtroom doors, made a call in the hallway, came back 2 minutes later, walked up to the bench. My father wants to speak with you. Judge Caprio didn't move. Your father is welcome to appear in this courtroom as a witness under oath. Otherwise, this hearing is being conducted on the record, and any attempt to influence it outside the proper channels will be documented. The bailiff's phone rang. He answered it, listened, then looked at Judge Caprio. Your Honor, Senator Hartwell is on the line. He's requesting to speak with you. Put him on speaker. The bailiff pressed a button. Senator Hartwell's voice filled the courtroom, deep, confident. Judge Caprio, this is Senator Richard Hartwell. I think we can resolve this matter reasonably. Madison made a mistake. I'm sure we can handle this quietly. Judge Caprio leaned toward the speakerphone. Senator Hartwell, I understand you're calling on behalf of your daughter. If you'd like to provide testimony relevant to this case, you may appear in person and be sworn in as a witness, but this hearing is on the record. It will remain on the record. And phone calls from elected officials to judges about pending cases are inappropriate. This call is being documented. There was a pause. Then the senator's voice came back, harder now. Judge, let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be. It's already complicated, Senator. 17 dismissed tickets are complicated. A Marine veteran missing chemotherapy is complicated. Your daughter using your office to avoid accountability for 3 years is very complicated. What's simple is the law. And the law says no one parks in handicapped spaces without authorization. Not your daughter. Not anyone. You're making a huge mistake. The mistake was made 17 times. I'm correcting it. Judge Caprio nodded to the bailiff. The bailiff ended the call. Madison stood there, face red, hands shaking. You have no idea what you've just done. Judge Caprio set his pen down. Miss Hartwell, sit down. Your father's office doesn't have jurisdiction in my courtroom. She sat. Her attorney looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Judge Caprio pulled out a document, started writing. Then he looked up. Here's what's going to happen. The fine of $85 is upheld. Additionally, I'm reinstating all 17 of your prior dismissed citations. That's $1,445 in fines. Plus, today's $85. Total of $2,550. Plus court costs. Madison gasped. Her attorney started to stand. Judge Caprio held up his hand. However, I'm going to offer you a choice. You can pay the full amount today, and we're done. Or you can complete a restorative accountability plan within 90 days, and if you complete it authentically, $2,125 of that fine will be stayed. You'll only owe $425. What kind of plan? 7 requirements. First, a written apology to Mr. Chen, Officer Torres, and the Cancer Center Administration. Handwritten, authentic, specific about the harm you caused. Not drafted by your attorney. Second, 120 hours of volunteer service at the Roger Williams Cancer Treatment Center. You'll work valet parking for patients, wheelchair assistance, patient transport, no supervisory role. You show up, you help people park, you help people get to their appointments. Third, you'll record a 3-minute public service announcement about accessible parking abuse to be shown at all Rhode Island DMV locations. Fourth, you'll complete disability awareness training, including spending 1 full day navigating Providence in a wheelchair. Fifth, you'll write a 2,000-word essay titled, How I Used Privilege as a Shield and What Accountability Actually Costs. Not fluff. Truth. Sixth, if Mr. Chen agrees, you'll meet with him in person and listen to the full impact of your actions. And seventh, you'll attend the next Providence City Council hearing on accessible parking enforcement, and you'll speak publicly about your experience. Madison stared at him. This is insane. No, Ms. Hartwell. Insane is 17 dismissed tickets while a cancer patient circles for 18 minutes. This is accountability. You have 2 options. Pay the full fine today or complete this plan in 90 days. If you complete it, most of the fine is waived. But if you perform these tasks, like you're checking boxes, if you fake even one reflection, if you have your attorney write your apology or your essay, the full amount becomes due immediately, and you'll be held in contempt of court. He looked at her directly. Mercy isn't a coupon. It's a contract with your future. Which option do you choose? Madison looked at her attorney. He whispered something. She shook her head. Then she looked back at Judge Caprio. I'll do the plan. You have 90 days. The clock starts today. Judge Caprio made more notes. Additionally, I'm making 5 formal recommendations to the Providence City Council and the Rhode Island State Legislature. First, all parking citation dismissals must be logged publicly with the reason for dismissal and the identity of the dismissing authority. Second, any citation issued to an elected official or their immediate family member must be heard by an independent arbiter from a different jurisdiction. Third, handicapped zone violations will now carry a minimum 100-hour community service requirement with automatic escalation for repeat violations. Fourth, the state will establish an anonymous hotline for reporting political interference in citation dismissals, investigated by the Ethics Commission. And fifth, accessible parking awareness will become a mandatory component of driver's education statewide. He looked around the courtroom. If you believe privilege shouldn't shield anyone from accountability, share this case. Let people know these reforms are possible. Then he looked back at Madison. You have 90 days. Don't waste them. He struck his gavel. Dismissed. Madison walked out of the courtroom without looking back. But this wasn't the end of the story. This was just the beginning. Because what happened over the next 90 days would determine whether Madison Hartwell was actually capable of change or whether she'd just learned to hide her entitlement better. Day 1. Madison sent an email. A typed apology to Mr. Chen. Generic. 3 paragraphs. Professional language. The kind of thing a public relations firm would write. Mr. Chen forwarded it to the court with a note. This isn't real. She didn't write this. Judge Caprio ordered her to try again. Handwritten. From her, or the deal was void. Day 4. Madison showed up for her first shift at the cancer center. She wore heels and designer clothes. The volunteer coordinator, a woman named Susan, looked her up and down. You'll be parking cars in the rain today. You need different shoes. Madison went to her car, changed into sneakers, came back, spent 4 hours in the parking lot directing traffic and parking cars for patients. She parked 14 vehicles. Complained the entire shift about the rain, about her hair, about how her feet hurt. Patients noticed. They saw her attitude. They saw her checking her phone between cars. Susan filed a report with the court. She showed up, but she didn't show up. Day 12. The disability awareness training included 8 hours navigating Providence in a wheelchair. Madison started at 9 a.m. She tried to enter a restaurant for lunch. No ramp. She wheeled 2 blocks to a different restaurant. Same problem. She finally found a place with a ramp. The bathroom was upstairs. No elevator. She tried to go to the mall. It took her 22 minutes to find accessible parking. She went to the coffee shop where she'd parked illegally 3 months earlier. Couldn't get through the door. Too narrow. That night, she wrote in a journal the court required her to keep. The entry was submitted as evidence later. She wrote, I never noticed. I walked past these places 1,000 times. I never noticed. The ramp wasn't there. The door was too narrow. The bathroom was upstairs. I never looked. Why didn't I look? Day 19. Madison sat down with a blank piece of paper and a pen. She wrote for 2 hours. Then she threw it away and started again. She wrote, Dear Mr. Chen, I don't know how to start this letter because I don't know how to apologize for something I didn't even see. I saw you as an inconvenience. No, I didn't see you at all. I parked in your space because I could, because no one ever told me I couldn't, because I believed my time mattered more than your health. I'm 23 years old and I've never had to think about where I park or whether I'll get in trouble or whether someone else needs something more than I do. I just take. I took your parking space. I took your appointment time. I took your dignity. And then I called my father to make it disappear. I'm sorry isn't enough. I know that, but it's where I'm starting. She mailed it. Mr. Chen received it 3 days later. He read it twice. Then he called the court. This one, I believe. Day 34. Mr. Chen agreed to meet Madison. They met in the parking lot of the cancer center. Madison arrived first. Sat on a bench. Mr. Chen wheeled up 10 minutes later. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Mr. Chen spoke. He talked for 40 minutes. Madison didn't interrupt. She didn't defend herself. She just listened. Mr. Chen told her about the Marine Corps, about serving his country, about getting diagnosed with cancer at 67, about the treatments, about losing weight and losing hair and losing dignity in 100 small ways, about trying to keep some control over his life by showing up on time, by following rules, by doing what he was supposed to do. And then he told her about that morning, about circling, about watching people walk past handicapped spaces that weren't theirs, about calling the front desk and hearing them tell him he'd have to reschedule, about parking 3 blocks away and walking, about throwing up on the sidewalk, about strangers seeing him like that. You didn't just take my parking spot, he said. You took my dignity. I'm a Marine. I don't ask for special treatment. I just needed the space they painted for me. And you took it because you could. Madison started crying. Not polite tears, real crying. I didn't think about you at all. I know, Mr. Chen said. That's the problem. They sat there for another 10 minutes. Then Mr. Chen wheeled away. Madison sat on the bench alone for an hour. From day 35 to day 60, something changed. Madison showed up for her cancer center, shifts in scrubs and sneakers. She brought umbrellas for patients when it rained. She learned their names. She asked about their treatments. She helped an elderly woman find her car after chemotherapy. She stayed late when the lot was busy. A patient's daughter stopped her one day. You're Senator Hartwell's daughter, aren't you? Madison tensed. Yes. You're different than I expected. Madison didn't know what to say. I'm trying to be... Day 71. Time to record the PSA. The production crew set up lights and a camera at the courthouse. Madison's first attempt was polished. Hair done. Makeup perfect. She read from a script. Parking in accessible spaces affects real people. Please be considerate of others. The director stopped recording. That sounds like a commercial. Try again. Second attempt. Madison loosened up. We all make mistakes. I made a mistake, parking in a handicapped space. I learned from it. Follow the rules. The director shook his head. Generic. Why should anyone care? Third attempt. Madison asked them to turn off the extra lights. She didn't do her makeup. She sat in a plain chair and looked at the camera. My name is Madison Hartwell. I parked in handicapped spaces 17 times. I used my father's name to make the tickets disappear. I never thought about who I was hurting until a judge made me look. I met a man named Robert Chen. He's a Marine. He has cancer. He couldn't park because I was in his space. He threw up on the sidewalk walking from 3 blocks away because I wanted coffee. If you're parking in accessible spaces because it's convenient, because you're only running in for a minute, because you think no one will notice, someone notices. Someone suffers. I did that. Don't be me. The director approved it. The PSA started airing at every DMV in Rhode Island 2 weeks later. Day 84. The Providence City Council meeting. 200 people in attendance. Madison was scheduled to speak during public comment. She sat in the back row. Her hands were shaking. When they called her name, she walked to the microphone. She didn't bring notes. She didn't prepare remarks. She just told the truth. My name is Madison Hartwell. I'm here because Judge Caprio gave me a choice. Hide behind my privilege or face what I did. I chose wrong 17 times. I'm choosing different now. I parked in handicapped spaces because I could, because my father's office made my tickets disappear, because I thought rules were for other people. Then I met Mr. Robert Chen. He's a Marine with cancer, and I made him throw up on a sidewalk because I wanted convenient parking. These reforms matter, because people like me will always exist. The system can't rely on us waking up. It has to stop us. She stepped away from the microphone. The room was silent for a moment. Then people started clapping. Not everyone, but enough. Day 90. Madison returned to Judge Caprio's courtroom. She came alone, no attorney. She wore jeans and a sweater. She looked different, tired, thinner. She stood at the defendant's table. Judge Caprio had her file open. Miss Hartwell, I've reviewed your completion records. 120 hours at the Cancer Center, verified. Disability awareness training, completed. PSA, recorded and approved. City Council testimony, confirmed. Essay, submitted. Apology letters, sent and received. In-person meeting with Mr. Chen, documented. He looked up. In your own words, what did you learn? Madison took a breath. I learned that access isn't a favor. It's a right I kept stealing. I learned that power without accountability is just cruelty in a nice car. I learned that my father's name opened doors for me and closed them for other people. I learned that changing after you're caught isn't the same as being good. It's just less bad. But it's a start. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. You stopped using your privilege as a shield and started using it to listen. That's not redemption, but it's accountability. He made a note. The fine is reduced as agreed. $425 remains due. Pay it today. Consider it your reminder that mercy isn't forgetting. It's moving forward differently. Madison paid. She left the courtroom, and the story could have ended there. But it didn't, because what Judge Caprio did in that courtroom started spreading. Within 6 months, Rhode Island implemented all 5 of Judge Caprio's recommendations. The public database went live, showing every dismissed citation with the dismissing authority's name attached. In the first month, 847 dismissals were flagged for review. 11 cases involving political families were transferred to independent arbiters. 9 of them resulted in fines being upheld. Handicapped parking violations now carried a minimum 100 hours of community service. Officers started enforcing accessible parking at medical facilities. Citations went up 340%, not because violations increased, but because officers finally felt empowered to write tickets that wouldn't just disappear. The anonymous ethics hotline received 63 reports of political interference in the first 90 days. 14 investigations were opened. And accessible parking abuse became part of mandatory driver's education. 47,000 new drivers were trained in the first year. Other states noticed. Massachusetts reviewed their enforcement policies. Connecticut implemented a dismissal transparency database. Hartford added political recusal protocols. New Haven launched an accessible parking awareness campaign. Disability rights organizations started citing the Hartwell case in legislative testimony across 8 states. 23 law schools added the case to their judicial ethics curriculum. 14 police academies started using Officer Torres's body camera footage in training. Mr. Robert Chen finished his chemotherapy. He's been cancer-free for 11 months now. He keeps the original citation on his wall, at home, framed, with Judge Caprio's ruling attached. He says it represents 2 things: the day he almost gave up, and the day someone in power said, "No, you matter." Other people came forward. A teacher who'd reported Madison 3 times for fire lane parking at her school. A hospital security guard who'd stopped enforcing accessible parking because dismissals made it pointless. Another disabled veteran who watched Madison's PSA at the DMV and cried because someone finally said what he'd been trying to say for years. Citizens started reporting accessible parking abuse at rates 340% higher than before. Not because violations increased, because people finally believed reporting mattered. Judge Caprio keeps 2 things on the bulletin board in his chambers: the original citation Officer Torres wrote, and a copy of Madison's handwritten apology to Mr. Chen. Next to them, 2 photos. One of Mr. Chen in his Marine uniform. One of Madison in scrubs volunteering at the Cancer Center. He keeps them there because accountability isn't a one-day event. It's a 90-day journey that someone has to choose every morning. In an interview later, Judge Caprio explained his reasoning. Madison looked at that handicapped space and saw convenience. Mr. Chen looked at the same space and saw survival. I looked at 17 dismissed tickets and saw a system that had stopped seeing either of them. Those are three very different kinds of vision. Justice is choosing which one matters most. He talked about why he didn't just fine her and move on. Because fines don't change people. They just make them more careful. Madison needed to see Mr. Chen, not as a case number, not as an inconvenience. As a Marine who threw up on a sidewalk because she wanted coffee, that's what accountability looks like. Not punishment, recognition. He explained why the 90-day plan mattered. A quick dismissal would have taught her nothing. A massive fine would have meant nothing. Her family would just pay it. But 90 days of facing what she did, that changes trajectory. And he talked about Mr. Chen. He couldn't make those tickets disappear. He couldn't call anyone. He could only circle and hope. Madison had options she never earned. That's not her fault. But using them, that's her choice. And choices have consequences. The case became something bigger than one parking ticket. Legal scholars started calling it the Hartwell standard. It's now referenced in judicial ethics discussions nationwide. Disability rights advocates use it in presentations. City planners cite it when designing accessible parking enforcement. Policymakers reference it when drafting legislation. It's mentioned in 47 legislative hearings across 12 states as a model for political accountability and accessible parking reform. Connecticut adopted dismissal transparency statewide in 2024. Massachusetts implemented political recusal protocols for all traffic citations. Vermont added disability awareness to judicial continuing education requirements. New Hampshire launched an accessible parking enforcement task force. Every single reform cited Judge Caprio's ruling and Madison's transformation as the catalyst. But here's the thing people forget. None of this happens without courage. Mr. Chen could have paid $85 and stayed silent. He showed up to court instead. He gave a victim impact statement. He met with Madison face to face. He forgave her publicly. Officer Torres could have looked away when he saw Madison's car. He could have not mentioned her threat about her father. He testified honestly despite knowing her political connections. And Madison, eventually, chose the hard path. She could have appealed. She could have hired more lawyers. She could have performed the minimum and called it done. Instead, she completed every task authentically. She spoke at city council. She recorded a PSA without makeup or a script. She met with the man she hurt and listened. Judge Caprio said it clearly in his closing statement. I didn't change Madison. I gave her a mirror. She chose to look. The courtroom proved that privilege can be challenged, that accountability can be taught, that transformation is possible when the system demands it. Madison proved that entitled cruelty isn't permanent. It's a pattern that can be interrupted if someone with power cares enough to try. Mr. Chen proved that victims don't need revenge. They need to be seen. And Judge Caprio demonstrated that justice without compassion is just paperwork, and compassion without accountability is just enabling. This case wasn't about parking. It was never about parking. It was about who gets to break rules, who pays for it, and whether anyone in power cares about the difference. It was about a system that had been quietly protecting the powerful for years while telling everyone else that rules matter. It was about 17 tickets that disappeared with 17 phone calls while a Marine veteran circled a parking lot for 18 minutes. And here's what the courtroom showed us. Rules exist to protect the vulnerable, not accommodate the powerful. Compassion isn't ignoring harm. It's demanding that the person who caused it face what they did. And justice means the system works the same whether your father is a senator or a stranger. Think about it. Madison could have parked anywhere that morning. She chose the handicapped space outside a cancer treatment center. She could have apologized to Officer Torres. She told him he was wasting his time. She could have paid the $85 ticket. She called her father's office instead. She could have shown up to court with humility. She threatened the judge. And when given the choice between a fine and accountability, she could have just paid the money. She chose the 90 days. That choice matters, not because it erased what she did. You can't erase making a cancer patient throw up on a sidewalk. You can't undo 3 years of using privilege as a weapon. But you can stop. You can look. You can change trajectory. And Madison did that. Not perfectly. Not without resistance. She failed her first apology. She complained through her first shifts. She showed up in the wrong clothes with the wrong attitude. But somewhere between day 12 in that wheelchair and day 34 sitting with Mr. Chen, something shifted. She stopped performing accountability and started living it. That's what the cancer center supervisor noticed. She stopped showing up like she was serving a sentence. She started showing up like she wanted to help. That's what Mr. Chen saw when they met in that parking lot. She didn't make excuses. She didn't defend herself. She just listened. That's what the city council heard when she testified. She wasn't reading from a script. She was telling the truth. And that's what Judge Caprio was waiting for. Not perfection, authenticity. Because the system doesn't need people who never make mistakes. It needs people who own them when they do. 6 months after Madison completed her plan, she was still volunteering at the cancer center. Not because she had to, because she wanted to. She worked every Saturday morning. Patients knew her name. She knew theirs. One of them told a reporter, "She remembers that my daughter is getting married next month. She asks about my treatment. She brings me tea when it's cold outside." Whatever she was before, she's not that anymore. Madison's father, Senator Hartwell, declined to comment on the case publicly. But behind the scenes, something changed in his office too. The calls stopped. The dismissals stopped. When asked about it by a journalist, an unnamed staffer said, "We don't do that anymore. That's it. No explanation. No apology. Just, we don't do that anymore." Maybe it was embarrassment. Maybe it was fear of the ethics investigation. Or maybe, just maybe, Senator Hartwell looked at his daughter completing 120 hours of community service and realized he'd been protecting her from the one thing she actually needed: consequences. A year after the ruling, disability rights advocates in Rhode Island published a report. Handicapped parking violations at medical facilities were down 67%. Political dismissals of citations were down 91%. Complaints about accessible parking to hospitals and treatment centers were down 54%. And public trust in the citation system, measured by surveys, was up 38%. Numbers, data, metrics. But behind every number is a person. Behind that 67% is someone like Mr. Chen who didn't have to circle for 18 minutes. Behind that 91% is someone who got held accountable instead of getting a phone call from their father. Behind that 54% is someone who found parking where they needed it. The Hartwell case became a symbol. It's referenced in advocacy presentations, in law school lectures, in police training, in city council debates. It's the case people point to when they say change is possible, when they say power can be held accountable, when they say one judge can make a difference. But here's what gets lost sometimes in the symbol: the details, the moments. Madison sitting in that wheelchair for 8 hours and realizing she'd never noticed Mr. Chen reading her first generic apology and saying, "This isn't real." Officer Torres testifying, despite knowing he might face political retaliation. Judge Caprio putting Senator Hartwell on speakerphone and refusing to take the call privately. The volunteer coordinator at the cancer center filing an honest report that Madison wasn't trying. Madison throwing away her first handwritten apology and starting over. The patient's daughter stopping Madison and saying, "You're different than I expected." The 200 people at the city council meeting listening to Madison admit what she'd done. Those moments are where accountability lives. Not in the final ruling, not in the policy changes. In the moments when someone has to choose between the easy lie and the hard truth. Between the performance and the real thing. Between hiding and showing up. Judge Caprio understood that. That's why he didn't just fine her. That's why he didn't just punish her. He gave her a structure, a framework, a path. He said, "Here are 7 things you have to do, but you have to do them authentically. You have to mean them, because I'm going to check. The court is going to check. And if you're faking it, the deal is off." That's not mercy. That's accountability with a roadmap. That's justice with a belief that people can change if the system demands it and supports it and verifies it. And it worked. Not because Madison was special, not because she was better than anyone else. It worked because the structure was clear, the expectations were high, and the consequences were real. It worked because Judge Caprio didn't lower the bar. He raised it, and Madison, slowly, painfully, imperfectly, met it. Other judges started asking, can we do this? Can we create these kinds of accountability plans? Can we demand transformation instead of just imposing fines? And the answer is yes, but it requires courage. It requires follow-through. It requires judges who are willing to stand up to power even when power calls them on the phone and tells them to back down. It requires officers like Torres who are willing to testify honestly. It requires victims like Mr. Chen who are willing to show up and tell their stories. It requires volunteers, like Susan at the Cancer Center, who are willing to file honest reports even when the person they're reporting has a powerful father. It requires a system that values truth more than convenience. The disability rights community calls the Hartwell case a turning point. They say it proved that accessible parking isn't a courtesy, it's a civil right, that enforcement matters. That dismissals based on political connections aren't just corruption, they're discrimination. Because when you let powerful people park wherever they want, you're telling disabled people their access doesn't matter. Mr. Chen said it clearly in an interview 6 months after the trial. Judge Caprio didn't just hold Madison accountable. He told every disabled person in Rhode Island, I see you. Your access matters. Your dignity matters. You matter. That's what I needed. Not revenge. Recognition. That's the legacy. Not just policy changes, not just reforms, recognition. The system looked at a Marine veteran circling a parking lot and said, this is wrong. This matters. You matter. And the system looked at a senator's daughter and said, your privilege doesn't make you exempt. Your father's office doesn't make you untouchable. The rules apply to you too. Both of those messages were necessary. Both of them were overdue. And both of them changed the culture in Rhode Island and beyond. Today, when you drive past the Roger Williams Cancer Treatment Center in Providence, you'll see something new. A sign. It's mounted at the entrance to the parking lot. It says, accessible parking is protected by law. Violations will be enforced without exception. In memory of the day we chose accountability. The Cancer Center put it up 6 months after the trial. They didn't ask for permission. They didn't wait for approval. They just did it because they wanted people to know things are different now. And they are. Things are different. Not perfect, not solved, but different. Because one judge refused to make a quiet deal. Because one Marine veteran showed up to court and told the truth. Because one parking enforcement officer wrote a ticket he knew would cause trouble. And because one entitled 23-year-old chose, eventually, to look in the mirror instead of looking away. That's the story. That's what happened when privilege met accountability in a Providence courtroom on a Tuesday morning in October. That's what happened when a judge made history by simply refusing to let power silence justice. So here's the question for you. Should political families face stricter accountability for violations, not easier dismissals? Should accessible parking violations carry mandatory community service instead of just fines that wealthy people can easily pay? Should transformation be part of justice, or should punishment be enough? What do you think? If you were in Judge Caprio's position, would you have given Madison the 90-day option, or would you have just imposed the maximum fine and moved on? If you were Mr. Chen, would you have agreed to meet with her, or would you have said no, the apology isn't enough? These aren't easy questions. They're not supposed to be, because justice isn't easy. It's not simple. It's not about picking the most convenient option or the quickest resolution. It's about looking at what happened, seeing all the people it affected, and asking, what does accountability actually require here? What does transformation look like? What does it mean for this to never happen again? Judge Caprio chose a harder path. He could have dismissed the ticket like 17 judges before him. He could have imposed a fine and moved on. He could have taken Senator Hartwell's call and worked something out quietly. He didn't. He chose the path that required more work, more follow-through, more courage. And because he did, 17 dismissed tickets became a case study in judicial ethics. One parking violation became a catalyst for statewide reform. And one senator's daughter became an example of what accountability can look like when the system demands it. Subscribe to Judgment Story for more cases where judges choose courage over convenience, where privilege gets challenged instead of protected, where one person's accountability creates systemic change, where justice remembers the people rules were designed to protect. Because sometimes The most important cases aren't the ones that make headlines. They're the ones that make history by simply refusing to let power write the ending. This story is a dramatization created for educational and storytelling purposes. It is not legal advice, journalism, or a verbatim account of court proceedings. All scenarios are fictionalized to illustrate principles of justice, accountability, and systemic reform. But the principles are real. The need for accountability is real. The courage required to challenge privilege is real. And the possibility of transformation, when the system demands it, is real too. Madison Hartwell's story isn't over. She's still volunteering at that cancer center. She's still learning. She's still choosing, every Saturday morning, to show up differently than she did before. That's not redemption. That's not absolution. That's just a person who finally stopped hiding behind privilege and started living with accountability. And Mr. Chen is still here, still cancer-free, still parking in handicapped spaces that are actually available now, still wearing his Marine's cap, still believing that the system can work when people like Judge Caprio are willing to make it work. That's the story of how a politician's daughter threatened Judge Caprio with one phone call, and how Judge Caprio's response made history. Not by backing down, not by making a deal, not by handling it quietly, but by saying out loud, on the record, where everyone could hear it, privilege doesn't shield anyone from accountability. Not in my courtroom, not today, not ever.